Eddie Tabash.
Well, thank you for having me today. The topic is actually taking atheism to the general public. The time is now. Ever see somebody on the edge of a diving board and they're standing there going, but they don't actually dive into the swimming pool? This somewhat comical simile represents what we atheists and general non-believers have been going through for thousands of years. Because at every epoch in history, there has been a promising beginning that we will counter superstitious belief systems with rational argument, and that those rational arguments will take hold, but it never comes to fruition. In every generation, there's been a promising beginning of a true vanguard movement that will finally achieve widespread public acceptance for non-belief. Yet in each generation, there has been an ultimately disappointing failure to actually register the naturalistic alternative to supernatural claims in the public consciousness. Now, why is this? Atheism, even with its most powerful scientific and philosophical arguments, still remains either the most publicly unnoticed viewpoint or the most publicly despised among all the competing worldviews pertaining to the nature of reality. It could take 100 years. Now, given the confounding extent to which religion is entrenched in our society, it could take a minimum of 100 years of sustained, intense effort to even begin to cut into the current monolithic stranglehold that religion has on American mass culture. We atheists have a double challenge. We not only have to present our arguments against supernatural claims, we also have to first persuade society that it is even morally acceptable to make those arguments. Too many people in our country take it for granted as a horrible, and I mean a horrible premise, that it is never even examined somehow, this premise, that religious claims deserve some special insulation from critical examination and doubt. Now, this is undoubtedly a vicious double standard in which folksy common culture approves of deep skepticism directed against all paranormal claims unless those claims are safely housed in the context of religion. So you can certainly ridicule or doubt the existence of UFOs or ESPs, but you better not doubt the resurrection of Jesus or biblical miracles. Then the same common sense culture expects even the most outlandish claims to be met at a minimum with respectful silence and an artificial forfeiture of the critical examination that would automatically be applied to everything else. So, our first problem is that the overwhelming majority of the American people believe, without any intellectual justification, that it is morally reprehensible to view the claims of religion in the same mode in which we view all other paranormal claims. There is not the slightest basis other than political and social pressure for providing religion with this most undeserved pass from the critical examination and doubt that all other outlandish claims receive. This is the first monolithical obstacle we have to burst through if we are going to get our message across. There's also a political problem. Some of you have heard me, as the voice in the wilderness, talking about the Supreme Court and the religious right. And unfortunately, the news after all these years of my standing there in the wilderness, yelling and screaming and waving my arms, saying the tidal wave is coming, is that it is still coming. Because the religious right is still as powerful as ever. And given the still undiminished power of the religious right, given that the outcome of this year's elections and the result of the presidential election in 2012 could still give them their ultimate authority to abolish separation of church and state and to acquire that just one more vote they need on the United States Supreme Court to nullify the precious mandate of government neutrality between believers and non-believers that has been in place since 1947, and that is literally our lifeline in this country, we atheists can no longer wait to begin our massive education campaign directed at the larger society. Now, none of us should, and I don't think any of us will do this, but none of us should underestimate the ferocity of the resistance that will meet our efforts. However, we cannot be deterred from our task by the opposition of even large-scale, rabid minorities and majorities who may fight us unceasingly. Now, going public with the atheistic message, and what is that message? That message is not a condemnation of the religious believer. It is not an attack on their intelligence level. The message is that if you look around and properly apply science and reason, you will see that the universe and everything in it is natural and not supernatural. That is the message. That is the message. But the message carries with it such connotations that it is the one message of any conceivable thought that will meet with the greatest resistance from society at large. Now, there have been interminable debates as to whether members of the general public are even able to comprehend the rigorous arguments in favor of the naturalistic worldview, or able but unwilling to exercise the effort necessary to comprehend these arguments, and that the only way out of this never-ending dispute is for us to take a multi-pronged approach. And that's what I am proposing today. We must make our strongest arguments, but vary their technical depth depending upon the audience. However, the fact that such distinctions are made in light of specific audiences should never lead to a wholesale dumbing down of the level of our argument in every case. University debates on God's existence are a wonderful way for the atheistic viewpoint to be brought to a most significant segment of the population, students. The preparation and the work necessary to become a competent debater against the existence of a supernatural God is not for everyone. However, those of us who can do this successfully should try to participate in these events as often as possible. Now, atheists need to call into those idiotic radio talk shows more often, because even if we are met with unremitting hostility, we have to begin to plant the seeds to get our message out. We need to write more op-ed pieces and more letters to the editor, particularly in smaller, more insular communities where religious fundamentalism tends to fester with greater uniformity. Now, the separation of state and church, government neutrality in matters of religion, must trump all other political considerations. I started a bit of controversy when American atheists back in 2002 began to send me around the country to talk about electing atheists to political office, and based upon my narrow, almost win of a seat in the California legislature in 2000, and where I wasn't able to generate support for my brother and sister atheists, though I was the first open atheist in history to seek a seat in the California legislature, that I saw certain problems. One of the problems I've seen is that many atheists will not give another atheist a pass on an unrelated issue. So if we hold each other to agree with us on every conceivable political issue under the sun, we'll never be able to support a colleague. Also, because keeping God and government separate is so important, it might be necessary for us to cross party lines to put a brother or sister non-believer in office. And unless we are willing to give brother and sister atheists who have the courage to run for office a pass on unrelated issues, we will not be able to unify behind one of our own on a candidate. We must make sure that we not only vote for political candidates at all levels of government who are committed to the separation of state and church, which is defined as government neutrality in matters of religion, but only a candidate, whether such individual is a believer or a non-believer personally, who is committed to the full equality of atheists should receive our votes, even if we disagree with them on other issues. No other person will be in agreement with us on every single issue. So, if someone is running for office and has a chance of being the first open atheist in your given community to attain political office, it is my recommendation, you don't have to do this, but it's my recommendation that you don't hassle them on whether they will agree with you on such issues as tax rates, immigration, death penalty, estate tax, or even what their specific view is on health care, if you have a chance of putting a brother and sister atheist into office. Because if we get that one more vote on the Supreme Court, if President Obama is defeated in 2012 by a religious right-winger, and we get that fifth vote on the Supreme Court, which is to say that a religious right-wing president replaces Justice Kennedy, for the first time since 1947, the religionists in this country will have 5 votes to say government must no longer treat the atheist equally. And the moment that 63 years of precedent will be overturned to say the non-believer no longer has to be treated equally before the law, we are dead. We have a theocracy. So therefore, making sure that we have our own people in state legislatures and our own people in local government to protect us in case a reconstituted Supreme Court allows local government for the first time ever to discriminate against us becomes paramount. We have to have our troops in place, because what would happen is a reversal of these separationist decisions by the Supreme Court, which are now the law of the land and protect us, would say to local governments, you no longer have to act in a way in which the believer and non-believer are equal. You can favor religion generally, collectively, as against non-belief. So if that happens, we need people to hold the line